Hi, Nathaniel.
Hi, Alex.
How are you?
I'm kind of stressed, actually.
Do you want to share more about that?
Well, I thought maybe we could talk about that today.
Okay.
Um, so I started my first week of work in the conference office as vice president for administration. Um, it feels like a huge fire hose that will not stop, and I also noticed that several of my colleagues, they don't really seem to have well-defined breaks, which then often translates into I don't get to have well-defined breaks. So that's a little awkward. But um, I'm stressed partly because my understanding of my kind of, I guess you could say, my work roles and my wife's understanding of my work roles seem to be different, meaning like how much time, would I put in. But also, I wonder if the other officers kind of don't really have well-defined understandings of work roles, as well as others in the conference office. I don't know if any of that makes sense, but it tends to translate into, I mean, obviously I'm salaried, and so you do the work as long as it takes to do the work, but the work isn't very well defined. Things come in, stuff like that happens, and um, I'm just kind of left wondering, how do I manage stress, but also trying to um, figure out, I guess, boundaries without, frankly, doing what my predecessor often did. And if he didn't want to do something, he didn't do it, and things didn't get done. So I don't know. I feel like I'm stuck between a rock and a hard place.
So it sounds like there was a lot there that you shared, which is totally fine. I just want to repeat some of it back to make sure I heard you correctly.
Mm-hmm.
So you feel overwhelmed by the amount of information and change that came with your new role, as well as possibly confused by like timelines and like when you get breaks, when you don't, your work hours, that kind of thing, and then maybe how to manage your time while you are at works and how to get everything done at the same time, because you don't want to leave things undone.
Mm-hmm.
Like your predecessor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd say that. It at one level, I think anyone in the office could say, well, I get to define my breaks and all that kind of stuff. But not if everyone says, hey, here's this thing you didn't know about. It has a deadline. It's due like in 15 minutes. And then I look at my calendar and I realize someone already scheduled me for a surprise meeting that I didn't know about. Well, what am I supposed to do? So, the idea that, yeah, you can have your own breaks, but it's kind of like pastoring. Yeah, of course, you can set your own calendar. Kinda. Unless an emergency happens. And part of the emergency is figuring out, did you just lie to me? Or you didn't lie to me, but did you lie to yourself? This isn't really an emergency, but it's an emergency to you versus, oh no, this is actually a real emergency. Like, yeah, my dad got hit by a bus and he's like in the intensive care. He might die.
That would be an emergency.
Yeah, it's like, well, okay, guys, I'm gonna leave this Bible study and I'm gonna go to that hospital, which I have done that in the past. So it's those kinds of things, and it's just a lot of stuff that I don't know. So yeah, I am quite confused. I know generally what I'm supposed to do, but then specifically, I keep finding it out, and nobody can really specify things because there really aren't a lot of specifics.
Sounds like you've done a lot of work looking at what the role might entail and trying to figure it out. Like you've really put in some time trying to figure out how to do it the best way possible because you want to do a good job.
Yeah. That hasn't really amounted to much, which has also contributed to the stress. I understand that in any of those roles, well, it's the same thing with pastoring. You can't really, to be able to give kind of an orientation or an onboarding, hey, we're gonna do a month of training. You can't really do that for a pastoring job. You can't really do that for a conference officer job either, because there's always just so much stuff that could happen or does happen, and could and does, they're not the same thing. And so, you know, here's a here's a handbook on how to do. Well, one, no one's written that, and that's only helpful, you know, kind of. But there are handbooks on pastoral ministry, and they have been helpful. Granted, if you're fresh out of something, they tend to be the most unhelpful because you don't actually know what you don't know, and you don't know if this is a good handbook or bad handbook. But after a year or two, the handbook can actually be really helpful for increasing knowledge. There's no handbook that I have found for VP for admin, VP for finance, president, you know, and I think that's up the chain, and so that's what's kind of confusing because if I ask, so what am I supposed to do? Like, what are my responsibilities? They'll tell me general things. Well, MOUs, contracts, legal things, dealing with immigration, dealing with, you know, okay. So then how do I manage the stress around it? Like, how do I know when something's coming? And we'll tell you. As in, like, you'll tell me the moment, like, it's due? Well, kind of. What? No. And then trying to tell the other staff to change their practices, well, it requires an entire shift in the way the conference office runs because part of their poor practices and therefore poor stress management is due to their officers. Well, you know, I'm waiting to hear from, you know, the VP for finance. Why? Well, because I need this piece of information before I can complete this part, and then hand it off to you, VP for admin. Okay, so have you told him? Yeah, I sent emails and messages. Okay, well, there's a deadline to this. Yeah, but he's also an officer, and so he can kind of do whatever. No. I mean, the law will definitely tell all of us what we can and cannot do. So it's one of those situations. But I don't know enough to be able to say, hey, here's what I need. Here are the boundaries I'm setting. It's hard to set boundaries about things that I don't know or understand. And so the idea of, well, I'll just set, you know, certain hours and certain time. Honestly, I assumed for at least the first 3 months I wouldn't be doing that because I don't know enough to be able to say no to this versus, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And especially, I do think people are still taking advantage of it. I mean, I think just this week, I had 3 things that were referred to me. They went to one of the other officers. Oh, well, that's not my thing. That's Nathaniel's thing. And maybe it normally is, but they're the ones who know. I haven't been around for all this time. They've been around for, like, you know, these past 2 or 3, 4, 5, 6 months. So I'm like, well, why didn't you give me the rundown on what you've been doing? I'm smart enough to, instead of saying, oh, sure, yeah, okay, let's do that. It's, well, let me find more information. So then I talk to people and I come to learn more of, okay, what decisions did you guys make? You know, and, well, I wouldn't do it that way, but I wasn't here and you made promises and we kind of really have to stick by those promises. And so it can be hard to be like, I know what you're doing. You're passing it off to me. Sometimes I can tell they're passing it off to me, but there's nothing I can really say because I wasn't here.
Mm-hmm.
Other things, I don't know if they're passing it off to me. And maybe, you know, 2 or 3 days later I go, I suspect they were passing it off on me, but I can't tell.
Yeah.
You know.
So I heard a lot in what you shared. You feel like you're flying blind.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's normal across my union. I even had a surprise meeting with all the other executive secretaries across the union, and they kind of said the same thing. And they were nonplussed about it. They weren't like, man, I can't believe it. They were like, yeah, that's just the way it is. I'm like, that must be an evidence that there is a gracious God, because why would we exist? You know? Except that he wasn't, you know, he was keeping us out of the courts, and because that just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. So you feel like you're flying blind and that it's kind of occurring all over, so then it's hard even to like access resources at other places that could be written even at the union level.
Mm-hmm.
And in addition to that, you haven't explicitly said this, so please correct me if I'm incorrect, but it sounds like, how do I say it? Not change, but the lack of schedule and like control of your schedule, plus not even having a reference point or a guidebook or something to kind of give you an idea for what could be coming your way at certain times is difficult to manage.
Yes, it's difficult on a professional and a personal level. The personal level, I've always been in control of my schedule. And to a degree, I am. So my secretary has said, hey, I don't have to schedule personal one-on-one things for you if you don't want it. And I'm like, no, don't, because you might accidentally schedule something at the time for an office appointment, or a doctor's appointment, or whatever. So the secretary is fine with that. However, there's a lot of it that's out of my hands, because my secretary knows what union meetings are coming, what NAD meetings are coming, what GC, and usually not even GC meetings. I'm not the president, so I'm not on those committees. But what conference things, what subcommittee, and I'm like, oh shoot, I don't know any of that stuff. So yes, I very much have to rely on my secretary. But so on a personal level, and I recognize that's a personal thing. So it just might be a wah sort of thing. But from a professional level as well, I'm not sure how. I think it's understandable for the new guy when he's new, but then to perpetually have to rely on either other officers or the secretary to know what things are coming, and for your response to have to be, hey, sorry, I didn't even know that was coming along.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to look really, and it's not, my frustration with it is not, well, that looks unprofessional. The church is not Hollywood. Our productions are never going to be great, even if we had some amount of money. They're never going to be able to compete with Hollywood. So I don't actually care about personal reputation or anything, but it does beg the question, if we are trying to set the stage for, I really hope you're not caring as a church member about me getting this done well, that's probably not going to be very great for mission. Because if we are setting them up for, I just want you to I want you to be prepared for, that this is kind of a circus. Then when we ask them to be serious about mission, they might be like, so, wait, is this part of the circus act too? Or are you serious? Like, when are you serious?
So it sounds like, so there's a general theme I've been hearing in what you've been sharing. That's the desire for professionalism and accountability to the church members and to the office people that you work with and the constituents, and just wanting to do a good job and really working hard to figure out your role and do it the best you can. So it sounds like some of the values you're bringing to the table are working hard, doing your best, being mindful of your responsibility and accountability to others, seeking to help other people both in the office and in the church conference that you're working in and at large. How would you say, and so I appreciate all of those things. I am wondering if, how this could maybe play into some of the things we've talked about in the past. I know we've spent a lot of time talking about fun. We spent some time talking about different wellness goals with tracking your calories, using your Garmin watch for activity. We talked about possibly doing some activity throughout the day at work. And we don't necessarily have to talk about those things now if you want to kind of just keep focusing on stress management. I'm just kind of wanting to get an idea of where you're wanting to take this time together. If you wanted to maybe focus on a different topic than we've discussed in the future, and we can maybe kind of hone in on that.
I'm kind of thinking I'd like to talk about stress management, and it's a very particular kind of stress management.
Okay.
Because I already know I can't change other people's habits until I really know what the habits are that I can say, hey, I'd really like this to be changed. And then it's kind of up to them. It'd be up to a negotiation, but I don't know enough to be able to do any of that kind of stuff. So, and for me, just to be like, well, this is what we're going to do, or I'm not putting up with this, or I don't know the landscape. I've actually set myself the task of not so much looking through the church manual, because I've looked through it quite a few times, but reading the NAD working policy, reading the bylaws and constitution for the conference, reading the new edition of the employee handbook, which I didn't realize that this is like the 3rd edition. And I'm like, I've been an employee for quite some time, and what, you guys just don't want to tell us that there's like a new edition? And we're not talking about, we changed a few commas. Like, I've looked through it, and they have some new sections that weren't there in the 1st edition that I I signed that I read it, and
Mm.
they've updated certain things. And went, well, wait, but that wasn't what it was before. Yeah, we decided. Who's we? Well, I know who we is, but like, does the employee ever get a say in? Hey, I don't think that policy is going to really work in the field. Boots on the ground and all that. Boots schmoots. I'm like, okay, so those are all frustrations. They feed into my stress. I do actually, I don't know about the fun part, but exercise wise, I've actually told my secretary, hey, I'm going for a 10-minute walk around the
Okay.
neighborhood. I'll be back. So if anyone's like, where did I didn't go home. I am coming
Yeah.
back.
I didn't just get up and leave.
Right. So, and I've done that, and people have been like,
That's
"Hey,
great.
where were you?" Well, I went for a walk. You want to go for a walk with me? So I've started doing some of that. Just like I'm
Yeah.
gonna, by fiat, I'm gonna do that. But the stress part in particular is, what do I do with all of these unfulfilled expectations? I sense that various people in the office have expectations for me. I have expectations for myself. I know my wife has expectations for me, and it's frustrating to feel like I'm constantly failing all those expectations. Especially when people, and it's not just my wife, there are others in the office who they talk like, well, no, but we had this conversation. I'm like, either I don't remember it that way, or I'm like, I promise I wasn't there when we had the conversation. And if that means I wasn't there in spirit, but I was there in body, that's embarrassing, but I wasn't there,
Okay.
But then others that are like, well, but you know this, right? No, I don't know. I did not pursue this job. This job pursued me. Come on, guys. I know canon law from 1,500 years ago. I don't know, all the ins and outs of, what do you think my wife will let me do? And let's put that in the policy. And okay, fine. And which I know some policies are that. Well, my wife won't let me go. She's going to feel really disrespected if I'm not home for. Oh, okay. Well, then we'll make this policy. And I mean, that's cool, but don't blame your wife. Don't throw her. Don't make her the reason. Decide that's what you're going to do. So it's just trying to figure out. And I know we're running out of time, but it's I'm still just, I feel like I'm bashing my head against a brick wall trying to figure out, how do I manage the stress that comes from feeling like a failure, feeling like I'm failing all kinds of expectations, multiple levels of expectations from multiple parties, and also not really knowing how to address that, because I feel like most parties have at least one unrealistic expectation for me. Okay, so you're going to get this, right? No. Even when I have an associate pastor, I'm like, this gal or guy is going to mess up. I'm counting on it. Why? Because they don't know what they're doing.
So, it sounds really heavy, honestly. Like you're carrying a lot of stress, and that this first week was a big learning curve, and you maybe don't feel as if you're getting the kind of grace from your peers as a learner would, like where they're expecting you not to know certain things, and they're kind of expecting you to come in and just know everything. And as you've expressed over the course of our time together, and there's a lot you don't know, and it's kind of very fluid still, and you're still getting your feet under you, so you still feel very new to it. And your desire, it sounds like, is you want to do something with this feeling of overwhelm and stress, but you're not sure what to do. I did have a question, because you mentioned some great work you've done with the walking, like we talked about last time, and that's just fantastic. You're really showing dedication to improving your health, and I think that's really awesome, even in the midst of all these changes. The move and this new job, etc. How do you feel when you go on those 10-minute walks? Does that seem to help with this feeling of stress at all?
No.
Okay.
But I do appreciate it, because I know it's improving my health.
Okay.
So it doesn't alleviate any kind of, I mean, maybe it does alleviate stress, but it doesn't feel like any stress is alleviated. I don't return to the office going, man, that was so great. But I do, it does end up actually helping me, because on a regular basis, I usually meet my goal of 3,600 steps a day.
That's great.
So
That's great. So you do feel satisfaction that it's helping you meet your 3,600 step goal. However, you're not feeling like it's really taking the edge off of that just feeling of such heaviness and stress. I know we only have a couple minutes left, and so we might not be able to hash out a full SMART goal, but I do want to maybe, if it's okay with you, for the last 2 or 3 minutes to explore, maybe brainstorm some ideas to help you feel a little bit less stuck with this feeling, and then maybe over the course of the next week you can think of some things. I know we meet actually in a couple of days, maybe then we can hash out more of a SMART goal. So what are some things that have worked effectively for you in the past regarding alleviating that kind of similar feeling of overwhelm and stress?
One of the things has been praying the Psalms according to the Eastern Orthodox Kathismata.
Okay.
It's a way they group the Psalms together, and if you're really good about it, you pray through the Psalms 3 times a day, so that in a week you've prayed through 150 Psalms.
Wow. Okay.
I've never been that ambitious, but when I have done it, you do a kathisma, a seat. That's what it means in Greek. 1 seat per time, and a seat is usually about 8 or 9 chapters or 8 or 9 psalms, and it's comprised of 3 stasis or a stasis, kind of a standing, and usually it's like 3 psalms in each one.
Okay.
So I usually will do like one of those a day or something like that.
Is that something you're interested in trying throughout your work day? Or do you want to keep brainstorming?
Maybe brainstorming, but I'm just trying to answer your question.
No, totally.
That's what has helped. And I think it's good for an officer of the church to go ahead and have a prayer habit throughout the day. So.
Yeah, that's great. Are there any other ideas?
I don't know. I know when I'm able to like slow down, there's no pressure on me for the moment. I'm given like a good 15 minutes breathing room. Some of that would be prayer. Some of that would be, contemplation, or, thinking about God, or just getting to kind of be at rest. That does tend to help me feel like, oh, I can reset and we can go.
Okay. I'm just gonna, a timer just went off. I'm gonna add another 2 minutes just so don't leave you hanging here. So just to repeat back what I heard you say, it sounds like in the past, praying through the Psalms, having 10 to 15 minute break to meditate or be quiet in your mind have been helpful for you.
Mm-hmm.
Would you like to maybe think about making a list of things that have been effective for you in the past, that no matter how big or small, and if all barriers were removed, so say there was no barrier with time or this or that, it can be as big or as small or as crazy as you want it to be. You could even say like riding a unicycle brings me joy, or I don't know. It can be as outlandish as you want. Maybe compiling a list and bringing that with you, and we meet again in a couple days, and then maybe we can explore more what kind of goal you might want to come up with or implement in your day to help with that stress. Does that sound like interesting?
I think I can do that. I just want to make sure, am I coming up with a list of things that bring me joy? Because you mentioned joy.
I did mention joy. I'm sorry if that was confusing. Specifically things that have helped you in the past with the overwhelm.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that confusing phrase shift there.
Yeah, I can do that.
Okay. And I know that isn't exactly maybe what you wanted to complete today, but it is a small step in the right direction, and you've done a great deal of work with your steps and taking walks throughout the day. I mean, those are some fantastic changes that you've made in a short amount of time over the last 7 weeks or so. And I just want to encourage you with that as we close out our session. Do you have any questions for me, or anything that stood out to you from today's session?
No questions. I guess the only thing that stood out for me was I didn't know where else to go in terms of how to respond to stress that is technically out of my hands. I'll probably get a handle on it in the next 3 or 4 months, but still, I just kind of assumed right now, I'm not gonna, you can't counter what you don't know. So you just gotta take it and kind of learn, okay, this is what's going on, and that way I can counter it. And so coming up with a list of things that help me, help me process the overwhelm feeling, that, I think that's helpful, because
Great.
I didn't think of it, so.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that, and I'm excited that we're meeting again in a couple days. I was thinking Sunday afternoon. We
Okay.
can work on a time, and then we'll touch base then, and that's great because it's before the start of your new work week, and we can see how it goes.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you for your time, and I'll see you next time.
Okay, thanks.
Bye.
Bye.